Hi, welcome to Facebook Live. It's Friday at 1:30. Today's topic is talking about heel strike versus forefoot strike in running. Quick announcement before we get started. You may have seen we've been nominated for Milwaukee's A-list for chiropractors, and we'd really love to share with everybody just how different and how great we think MSWC's philosophy is. So if you have a chance or you've been able to experience it and you've had a good experience, please take a minute to go on and vote for us on Milwaukee's A-list. Let's get started talking about heel strike versus forefoot strike. This is something that's often been debated, and there's been a big push for more of a forefoot strike in running, especially in recent years. And the reality is that forefoot striking does give you a lot of benefits in terms of absorbing better forces, not having so much impact on the initial landing when your foot hits the ground. But the downside is that it does take a big change in a lot of the way that the tissues have to take forces. So let's talk about some ways that you might know, should you be a heel striker or should you be a forefoot striker? I'm not one that says everybody should forefoot strike, and I certainly don't think everybody should heel strike. I think that there are reasons why you may need to stick with one or the other, especially for a period of time. So the first thing that I'd like you to give a try is take your shoes off and try running barefoot. There are some people who inherently just do better with a heel strike. You know, a lot of these people, when you take your shoes off and you don't have padding and you're just running across the floor, say at the gym or down the sidewalk, if you naturally heel strike, you may be somebody whose body requires more of that heel strike mechanism. So that's one way to kind of tell if it's worth kind of changing over or not. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a good way to get started. Another way that you might be able to tell if it's worth changing over from a heel strike toward a forefoot strike is depending on the types of injuries you may have had in the past. If you've had injuries in the past that are more related to difficulty absorbing forces, so these would be things like shin splints, stress fractures in either your foot or your leg, IT band pain, or that side of the knee or the hip pain, bursitis. Those injuries tend to be related to lack of control of the foot and also to difficulty with absorbing forces. And if you've had a hard time with absorbing forces, using a forefoot strike is a great way to reduce those forces right away. You don't have such a shock of an impact. When your heel hits the ground, that really reverberates all the way up the leg. Whereas when you hit with the midfoot, it absorbs those forces and it kind of distributes them much quicker. So if you've had a past injury of shin splints, IT band, some of those things that I listed, you may be somebody who wants to switch over more toward a forefoot strike. On the flip side, if you've been somebody who has had Achilles injuries in the past, calf strains, hamstring strains, it may be worth working on your mechanics before you switch into a forefoot strike. When you forefoot strike and your foot hits the ground, on that front of the ball of your foot, you have to drop your heel toward the ground and then spring back up. That puts a lot more load onto the tissues in the back of your calf. So the calf, the hamstring, the Achilles, even the plantar fascia have to be able to bend and stretch and be pliable to stretch and then bounce back to give you that motion. So if you are somebody who has had other injuries like Achilles, calf strains, hamstrings, you may be somebody who needs to work on the pliability of those tissues or your mechanics before you can tolerate a lot of repetition of that load. Those are people that I really would rather take through mechanics work and get you to a point where you're able to tolerate it before you load those tissues and you cause more problems. As a general rule, you never want to make your changes in the middle of the season, and you never want to make changes fast. So right now is actually a great time to start thinking about if you want to change your mechanics. Running season's coming to the end. We've got Milwaukee Running Festival this weekend. We've already gotten through Lakefront Marathon here in Milwaukee. Chicago Marathon was last weekend. So it's a good time to start thinking about if you want to change your mechanics and to do it over more of a winter or a lower volume season before spring and summer hits. If you're going to start making the changes, you need to do a couple things. First, I really recommend that you make sure you get evaluated and you see where you're at on the spectrum of mobility, stability, what's your foot strength. Make sure that you know kind of what you're getting into and what's best for you. If you've been evaluated or you already know, then you want to make sure that you work on your mechanics, you get them ready so that by the time you're ready to start transitioning into the different types of shoes or the different types of running, especially higher volume in the spring, you've gradually worked into it. We want to see typically around a 5 to 6 month window where you're gradually working in. Now, if you're a really high level athlete that's already doing high volume, we may need to shift that a little bit and make that a little bit longer, or vice versa. So bottom line, should you heel strike or should you forefoot strike? They both have benefits, they both have reasons. It depends on the person, it depends on your past history, and it depends on your needs. We hope you've enjoyed this little segment. Join us every Friday. Next week, I believe, is questions and answers, so we'd love to get your questions and see what's important to you. And we look forward to seeing you next time.